Everybody asking how we doing, say we good. Don't need no one to tell me how to live just like they would. It ain't their business, but they in it, I don't know why. Revolved around my life after I found another.
Assalamualaikum, Tajahal, Wanakum, and good morning to my respected lecturer, Cecil Nazmi, and to all the audience. Thank you for joining me today. My name is INSYIRAH binti KAMAL SHAPARI, and I will be presenting a case study analysis entitled Family and Educators Supporting Bilingualism in Early Childhood, written by M. Victoria Rodriguez. Therefore, this presentation is conducted to fulfill Task 2 requirement for course code TSLB3293. Without further ado, let's begin. But before that, it is not very cordial if I don't properly introduce myself. My name is INSYIRAH binti KAMAL SHAPARI, and my index number is 20222924401226. Before we dive deeper into today's presentation, let me break down the table of contents. Firstly, I will talk briefly about the introduction, followed by backgrounds and findings. Next, we're going to look into strategies that the 3 Latino families implemented, the challenges they face, and I also will be providing some recommendations and advantages, and we will end with a conclusion and Q&A session. Now, let's look at the abstract first. Bilingualism, the ability to speak and understand 2 languages proficiently, is a phenomenon of growing importance in today's multicultural society. As globalization continues to connect people from diverse linguistic backgrounds, the ability to communicate effectively in multiple languages has become increasingly valuable. This presentation explores the significance of bilingualism, particularly in early childhood, and its implications for cognitive development, sociocultural integration, and economic opportunities. Now, let's see some definitions of bilingualism that are stated in the case study. Firstly, Digani 2022 cited that bilingualism or multilingualism refers to the coexistence of more than one language within an individual. Meanwhile, Barak 2020 said that the definition of bilingualism is complex and is influenced by multiple factors such as the age of acquisition of the second language, continued exposure to the first language, L1, relative skill in each language, and the circumstances under which each language is learned. In a smaller scope, we will see the definition of bilingualism, particularly in young children. Remisen 2020 said that bilingualism, particularly in young children, is a nuanced and dynamic field of study that encompasses the acquisition and development of 2 languages, typically taking place during the preschool years. And lastly, Lauren 2021 said that bilingual children may say their first words slightly later than monolingual children, but still within the normal age range between 8 to 15. Apart from that, I also provide few statistics that relate to the case study. Firstly, it has been estimated by researchers that a minimum of 43% of global population have the ability to be fluent in more than one language. Next, a study indicates a minimum of 5% of individuals in the United States are multilingual, meaning they speak more than one language at home. And the third one is the percentage of American elementary schools offering foreign language instruction decreased from 24% in 1997 to 15% in 2008. In the United States, 20.7% households speak a language other than English. So, this is the statistic that shows the percentage of bilingual speakers in the world. So now let's see the overview of the presentation based on the case study. Firstly, the case study presented in this analysis delved into the experiences of three Latino families in the United States as they navigate the challenges and opportunities associated with fostering bilingualism in their young children. And next, through interviews, observations, and data analysis, the presentation aims to uncover the motivations, strategies, and challenges faced by these families in promoting bilingual proficiency to their young children. So now, let's delve briefly about the background of this case study. Firstly, it's about understanding bilingualism. So bilingualism refers to the ability to fluently speak and comprehend two languages. For Latino families in the United States, bilingualism often involves navigating between English and Spanish, reflecting the rich linguistic heritage and cultural diversity within these communities. Secondly, significance of bilingualism. For the three Latino families examined in the case study, the Cortes, Jimenez, and the Velasquez families, bilingualism is not merely a matter of language proficiency, but also a means of preserving cultural identity and heritage. And by speaking both English and Spanish, children from these three families gain access to diverse cultural perspectives, expand their communication skills, and develop a stronger sense of belonging within their communities. Still in the main topic of background, we will see how bilingualism can benefit in both social, cultural, and economics. Firstly, in terms of social-cultural, bilingualism fosters a cultural competence and intercultural understanding, allowing children to navigate diverse social contexts with confidence and empathy. So, relate to the case study, within the Latino household, the ability to communicate in both English and Spanish strengthens the family bonds, facilitates connections with extended family members, and preserve cultural tradition across generations. Likewise, in terms of economy, from an economic standpoint, we know that bilingualism enhances employability and opens up opportunities for career advancement. So, to relate to the case study, for the Cortes, Jimenez, and Velasquez families, proficiency in both English and Spanish is seen as an asset that can lead to better educational outcomes, higher paying job prospects, and increased social mobility for their young children. Moving on, in this slide, I will be talking briefly about the importance of bilingualism, particularly in two aspects, which are cognitive and emotional. In terms of cognitive advantages, bilingualism will significantly enhance problem solving skills and create a greater cognitive ability. Meanwhile, in terms of emotional advantages, bilingualism can foster cultural awareness and empathy in young children. In this slide, I will provide the objectives of this presentation in which I will break down these three aspects of objective. Firstly, the motivation of the Latino families. The primary objective of the case study is to explore the motivations of Latino families in the United States regarding bilingualism in early childhood. Secondly, examine bilingualism strategies. Another key objective is to examine the strategies employed by the Latino families to foster bilingualism in their young children. And lastly, identify challenges faced. Additionally, this case study also aims to identify the challenges faced by Latino families in their efforts to maintain bilingualism. So the objective significantly correlate with the case study. The objective outlined in the previous slide directly correlate with the case study presented earlier, which explores the experiences of three Latino families, the Cortes, Jimenez, and Velasquez families, as they navigate the complexities of bilingualism in their children's early years. Moving on to the topic findings, here I will break down the three families into three aspects, which are motivations, strategies, and challenges. Firstly, the Cortez family. For motivations, the Cortez families prioritize bilingualism to preserve their cultural heritage and prepare their children for academic success. So the strategies that they implement is they plan to speak Spanish at home and relied on formal schooling for English instruction. However, their efforts were challenged by intense English input outside the home, particularly at daycare. So the challenges that they face is Josephine's exposure to English intensive environments hindered her Spanish language development, highlighting the difficulty of maintaining language separation between home and school. Secondly, Germina's family. In terms of motivations, the Geminis family saw bilingualism as essential for enhancing their children's future employment opportunities and cultural identity. So for the strategies that they implement is they sought bilingual nursery services to complement language exposure at home. However, limited access to such facilities and familial dynamics favoring English pose challenges to sustaining Spanish language dominance. And for the challenges that they face, Kayla limited exposure to Spanish within the family and conflicting language attitudes among relatives hindered her bilingual development, emphasizing the importance of consistent language. And lastly, for the Velasquez family, the motivations is the Velasquez family aim for bilingual proficiency to ensure their children's academic success and future prospects. So for the strategies that they implement is they prioritize Spanish language dominance at home and advocated for bilingual education in the formal schooling. However, there is exposure to English dominated environments and limited Spanish language instruction from siblings presented challenges to her bilingual acquisition. And for the challenges that they face, that is reliance on English speaking siblings for language input and the absence of regular Spanish instruction hindered her bilingual development. And this underscored the systemic barriers to accessing bilingual education progress. For this slide, I will be explaining in detail about the strategies of implementation for each family. So for the rationale, the Cortes family aimed to create a language separation between home and the Cortes family aimed to create a language separation between home and school, prioritizing Spanish at home and relying on English instruction at school. They believe this would preserve the cultural heritage while ensuring English proficiency for academic success. Meanwhile, for the effectiveness, however, intense English input at daycare and limited Spanish exposure at home challenged their strategy. Despite efforts to maintain language acquisition, to maintain language separation, Josefina's exposure to English intensive environments hindered her Spanish language development, suggesting the need for more balanced language input. Secondly, for Gemini's family, the Gemini's family emphasized the practical benefits of bilingualism for future employment opportunities and cultural identity. They sought bilingual nursery services to complement language exposure at home, aiming to provide consistent Spanish language input. But the limited access to bilingual daycare facilities and family dynamics favoring English past challenges to sustaining Spanish language dominance. Conflicting language attitudes among relatives further hindered Kayla's bilingual development, highlighting the importance of consistent language reinforcement. And lastly, the Velasquez family. For the rationale, the Velasquez family prioritized Spanish language dominance at home and advocated for bilingual education in formal schooling to ensure academic success and future prospects. For the effectiveness, despite efforts to promote Spanish language proficiency, that is exposure to English dominated environments and limited Spanish instruction from her siblings presented challenges to her bilingual acquisition. And this absence of regular Spanish language instruction hindered her bilingual development, underscoring the need for comprehensive bilingual education programs and systemic support. Moving on, in this slide, I will be explaining in detail about the challenges that each family face in fostering bilingualism in their young children. We're going to start off with the Cortes family. Their challenge is having difficulty in maintaining language separation between home and school due to the intense English input at daycare and limited Spanish exposure at home. For the implications, Josephine's exposure to English intensive environments hindered her Spanish language development, raising concerns about balanced language input and the impact on her bilingual secondly, for Germina's family, the challenges that they face is limited access to bilingual nursery services and familial dynamics favoring English language use pose challenges to sustain English language dominance at home. And the implication is conflicting language attitudes among relatives and insufficient Spanish language reinforcement hindered Kayla's bilingual development, highlighting the importance of consistent language input and supporting familial environment. And lastly, for the Velasquez family, the challenges that they face is that is exposure to English dominated environment and limited Spanish instruction from her siblings presented challenges to her bilingual acquisition. And the implications, the absence of regular Spanish language input and limited access to bilingual education hindered that is bilingual development, underscoring the need for more comprehensive bilingual education programs and a more supportive support for language acquisition. In this slide, I provide the impacts of bilingualism, particularly in the aspect of cognitive. Firstly, bilingualism enhances cognitive flexibility. Bilingual children exhibit superior abilities in switching between languages and adapting to various linguistic contexts, reflecting heightened cognitive flexibility. Next, metalinguistic awareness. Bilingualism promotes metalinguistic awareness, enabling children to reflect on language structure and use, thereby enhancing overall language proficiency and literacy. Secondly, in the aspect of social cultural competence, bilingualism exposes children to diverse cultures, fostering appreciation, understanding, and respect for linguistic and cultural diversity. Next, intercultural understanding. Bilingual children develop intercultural competence, enabling them to navigate multicultural societies effectively and contribute positively as global citizens. And lastly, the advantages in terms of economic opportunities, employability. Bilingual individuals have a competitive edge in the job market, with language proficiency valued by employers seeking candidates who can communicate effectively in international business environments. Secondly, career advancement. Bilingualism opens doors to career advancement and international opportunities, enabling individuals to overcome linguistic barriers and excel in diverse professional settings. Moving on, in this slide, I will be providing some recommendations to cope with the challenges in the case study. Firstly is community engagement. Bilingual storytime session. So community can organize interactive storytelling sessions conducted in both English and the heritage language to promote language reinforcement and cultural enrichment. Secondly, cultural festival. Community can host cultural festivals showcasing diverse linguistic and cultural traditions to celebrate linguistic diversity and foster a sense of belonging among bilingual families. Secondly, policy advocacy. Policy can advocate for the implementation of inclusive language policies in educational institutions to support bilingualism and multilingualism among students from diverse linguistic backgrounds. Secondly, resource allocation. Lobby for adequate funding and resources to support bilingual education programs, including hiring bilingual teachers and providing instructional materials in multiple languages. And the third one is educational training. Firstly, professional development. Offer training and professional development programs for educators to enhance their knowledge and skills in supporting bilingual learners effectively. And secondly, cultural competence training. Provide training on cultural competence and sensitivity to help educators create inclusive learning environments that celebrate linguistic and cultural diversity. And lastly is my own final thoughts or conclusion. Fostering bilingualism in young children is essential for promoting academic success, cultural diversity, and global citizenship. By addressing challenges and implementing recommendations, we can create a supportive environment that empowers children to embrace their linguistic heritage and thrive in interconnected world. All right. So now moving on to the Q&A session. I have provided 4 questions from my friends and I am going to answer each of them. So for the first question is from my friend Zinran.
你好，INSYIRAH，我有一个问题想要问你，请问科尔特斯家族如何应对在英语为主的环境中保持西班牙语能力的挑战，特别是在约瑟芬娜参加英语日托的情况下
？So for the first question, how did the Cortes family address the challenge of maintaining Spanish language proficiency in an English dominant environment, particularly with Josefina attending an English speaking daycare? So the answer is the Cortes family tackled the challenge of maintaining Spanish language proficiency by prioritizing Spanish immersion at home. Despite Josefina attending an English-speaking daycare, her parents ensured that Spanish remained the dominant language in their household. They encouraged Josefina to communicate in Spanish with family members, especially with elderly relatives who were monolingual Spanish speakers. Additionally, they limited English exposure at home and emphasized the importance of a Spanish language instruction within their family environment. So, second question is in French, but I will also read and provide a translated version of English version in this slide. So the question is, quelle stratégie la famille Gemini a-t-elle employée pour surmonter le manque d'accès à des services de carte volant? Et comment a-t-elle fait face à une dynamique famille favorisant l'utilisation de la langue l'anglais? So in English, it says, what strategies did the Gemini's family employ to overcome the lack of access to bilingual daycare services? And how did they navigate familial dynamics that favor English language use? The answer is the Gemini's family employed several strategies to address the lack of access to bilingual daycare services. They leverage familial connection by enlisting Spanish-speaking relatives such as Kayla's grandmother to provide care and interact with Kayla in Spanish for extended periods. Additionally, they actively sought out opportunities for Spanish language reinforcement within the home environment, such as engaging in cultural activities and utilizing Spanish language resources. Despite familial dynamics that favored English language use, they emphasize the importance of bilingualism and encourage careless exposure to Spanish through various means. So for the third question, can you elaborate on the Velicus family's approach to promoting bilingualism, considering Mrs. Velicus' emphasis on Thais achieving fluency in both Spanish and English by a certain age? So, the answer would be the Velicus family's approach to promoting bilingualism centered on Mrs. Velicus' goal of ensuring Thais fluency in both Spanish and English by a certain age. They emphasized Thais bilingual development from an early age and set specific milestones for her language proficiency. Mrs. Velicus actively engaged Thais' older sibling, who was proficient in English, to assist in her language learning process. Additionally, they facilitate Thais' exposure to English through social interactions and media consumption, while prioritizing Spanish language dominance within the home environment. And last question would be, how did the families balance the importance of maintaining Spanish language proficiency with the recognition of the societal pressures favoring English proficiency, especially with regards to academic and career opportunities? So, balancing the importance of maintaining Spanish language proficiency with societal pressures favoring English proficiency pose challenges for the families. They recognize the significance of English language skills for academic and career opportunities, but also value the preservation of their own cultural heritage through Spanish language proficiency. To navigate this balance, the families implemented strategies to promote bilingualism while also ensuring that their children were adequately prepared for English dominated environments. They emphasized the cognitive, social, cultural, and economic benefits for bilingualism, emphasizing the value of maintaining proficiency in both languages for their children's future success. Now that we have come to the end of this presentation, I would like to say thank you so much for engaging in this presentation. Thank you. Terima kasih. Selamat. Gracias. Arigato. Au revoir. And see you next time.